Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for E-commerce Pros Talk DTC, the good, the bad, and the opportunity. Please note that your microphones have been muted, and we encourage you to submit questions anytime throughout the session using the Q&A at the bottom of your screen or the chat functionality, and we will respond to as many questions as possible in the last 15 minutes of the session. This session will also be recorded, and you will each receive a link to the content following the session. Today, we are super lucky to be joined by experts from the e-commerce industry, including Beverly Stotz, former North American CMO of illycaffè with over 20 years of experience building successful DTC coffee business. Allan Peretz, president of Bold Strategies with over 25 years of experience launching DTC brands for P&G and other global consumer brands. And last but not least, Seraj Bharwani, chief of strategy at AcuityAds with 25 years as a digital advertising specialist. AcuityAds is a decision science technology platform for performance advertising through digital channels. Without further delay, I pass you to Seraj.
Thank you, Joanna. So welcome, everyone. So glad and delighted you could join us. So let me set the stage up before we get into the discussion, Allan and Beverly. So much has really happened. It's almost like in the last 3 months, a few years have gone by. Just about every e-commerce forecast that we knew of about 3 or 4 months ago have all been exceeded in some significant ways. Essentially, e-commerce have brought forward all of those forecasts by about 2 or 3 years. So what took about 10 years to get there, in the last 12 weeks or so, we've actually seen this as a percentage of retail sales grow some significant acceleration, right? Which is all very exciting. E-commerce has become the predominant the channel for shopping, which is again not surprising, that people simply can't go to shopping places and so forth. And still now, it's hard as we are hoping to reopen the economy. It's very difficult. Okay, so if you look at the past 70 years of research, what you find is that all it takes is 60 days, to be precise, 66 days of anything that we as humans do consistently over that period, and that begins to form a habit, and we tend to stay with it. If you want any proof of what happens in the e-commerce channel, go look at anything in other countries that have already emerged from the crisis phase. China, Australia, New Zealand, any of those, Korea, and you find is that e-commerce is on the same accelerated trajectory, which means we should expect something similar to happen here. Now, long before all of this excitement happened, some of these brands were truly prescient. They were already on a path to create something significant out of dealing directly with the consumers and challenging the status quo. You've heard of a lot of these brands, right? And they were the ones that anticipated that people would want to deal directly with the brands and want to be able to shop in the convenience and the way they like it, right? Significant contribution to the GDP in literally over $1 trillion in just a few years. It's fantastic, right? Look at what's gone on here in terms of like challengers stealing market share. Like the Harry's and the Dollar Shave Clubs literally took away 20 points of share away from Gillette in just a period of 10 years. It's fascinating, right? To the point that one of those had to be acquired by Unilever to get into the shaving business, and they debated getting in there for a long time. You know that, Allan. We look at the home furnishings business with, Casper, Satwa, Purple, pretty much really attacking the established ones. And just the list goes on and on in just about every category, right? We just happen to have a lot of experience with these guys at Purple, right? We are fortunate, we love it. The fact that they have trusted us to be their partner and so forth. These guys have gone just amazing gangbusters, right? I mean, if you looked at the stock price, frankly, up until yesterday, it was very close midday at $19. That's 3x from their time when they actually went public, just recently, right? And so it's all out there. But here's the thing, the stakes are even bigger than just going online and becoming DTC and becoming leader, right? If you do accomplish that, the big distribution retailers, the mega scale retailers like Walmart and Target and Walgreens actually want to carry you in their retail establishments. So it pays to win. If you win online, you win the omni-channel leadership status, which is absolutely fascinating. All right, so the news is all good, right, so far. The question then is, what's really the bad news? Well, the bad news is we are into a gold rush at this point. Everybody and their brother and their mother wants to now be in doing e-commerce.
Let's give Seraj a second. Looks like his screen is frozen.
Hear me?
And there he
Hey,
is.
you're back.
Yep, you're back.
I paused a little bit, right? I warned you, so let me warn the audience. 3 o'clock in the afternoon is prime time. You know, the bandwidth is being hogged by everybody. And so whenever you guys all freeze, I will know, I'll pause for a few seconds and be back, all right? Okay,
I will say it was very dramatic though, so.
Okay. So here we are. If you look at what's happening, the sellers doing over $1 million in annual revenue, frankly, are a very small select bunch of the 8.5 million sellers who are on Amazon. So literally, it isn't easy. And so why is it not easy? Well, let me start with just the basic core limitations. As we progressively become a contactless society, right? We are moving progressively towards a smaller and smaller device and screen formats. Now, what does that mean? That means that the retail shopping window is shrinking. It's shrinking amazingly. Look at that. You could walk down an aisle, Walmart, Whole Foods, wherever, you could see a whole bunch of SKUs on a single shelf, right? Well, you go on a digital, on your laptop or a desktop, you're down shrinking to 1/10 of that. By the time you get to mobile, well, it's even further down. And if you get to the voice activation, you're down to 1. It's crazy, right? So essentially there's fundamental limitation in terms of getting visibility, right? The second is there's no benefit of impulse buy. I heard the Hershey's CMO a few days ago, and they were saying so much of their buys, the candy buys, were actually happening from the front shelf. And now everything in online is all middle of the aisle, the big bulky items, you know, that they are usually used to selling around Halloween or big holiday periods and so forth, right? So the whole merchandise shift happens significantly. Consumers can't touch or feel anything. There's a much higher perceived risk of a purchase, which means the experience has to be very different, right? This is just to name a few challenges, guys. The reason I'm setting it up this way is I'm saying this is now the time, not for the amateurs, but really for the pros. We need the guidance and help from people who've actually done it for decades and can really guide us and advise us as to how to make it and navigate through the vast and the rough seas of e-commerce. With that, let's introduce Beverly and Allan. Thank you, guys. I'm so delighted you could join. because there is no better way to really deal with this discussion than to have people who can really practically deal with it. You know, we don't get too excited. You know, this is not glass half full or half empty. It's essentially some balance. We got to be smart and be mature about the way to deal with this channel, right? And so how do we work with that, right? So Beverly, let's start with you. All right. So you've told me about your background, and frankly, without really embarrassing you, it's impressive. Really, I just can't imagine that you being able to spend over a couple decades with a brand like illycaffè and be able to accomplish, which I struggled significantly with craft when I was trying to do Gevalia coffee, frankly. It was a tough category to operate on in those years. What got you into this thing? Why were you there for as long as you were? And what was so enticing about this brand? What motivated you to be there, and how did you get, you know, accomplish what you did?
Okay. Thank you, Seraj, for having me and Allan join you today. So what really inspired me about the Illy brand was my love for premium brands. And so I've had the great fortune not only to work on the Illy brand, but I've also worked on L'Oreal as well as Haagen-Dazs. So I've focused my career on premium brands, and I simply love working with them and on them. So the Illy brand is a really rich and interesting brand. It's global. It's privately held. It's based in Italy. It's sold all over the world in around 140 plus countries, and it's an omni-channel brand. So it's sold in all the various channels with particular roots in hospitality and food service, actually. So my role within the North American context was both to build the Illy brand in the American and Canadian markets, right? And to support the revenue growth of the business. And I also had direct accountability for the e-commerce P&L with my team that we built together over many years. So what really inspired me to stay at Illy and to work at Illy was really the brand and the people, of course. Illy's experiential. It's a super premium brand. And think of a time when you may have gone to Italy for a trip and you may have had the opportunity to have a beautiful Italian coffee at a coffee bar. And, you know, you come back home and you're thinking about those experiences and how do you recreate that in your own home here in the States?
This is very interesting. I love that, because really, I was so curious, because the first time I learned about Illy, frankly, as much as I travel a lot. And my first experience with Illy was literally on an airport. And it drew my attention. Normal coffee shops don't. It just, the first feeling I got was, boy, this is different. I mean, there's something upscale about it, and the way it was set up, the showcases, the merchandise, the whole thing was done very differently. And I think I was always wondering, it's like, from that experience, what got you and the senior management team there to think about that people would actually want to actually bring that experience home, like some part of it, right? How did that happen? Like, did people start approaching you and saying, hey, I want to take it home? Or you just saw the opportunity and started that?
Right. So back when we started in e-commerce, it was really on the front edge of the curve. So I'm going back to 1999 and 2000, when we had demand for Illy, but we didn't really have national access to the brand because we were limited in our distribution in traditional stores. And back then we had a big presence in food service and hospitality, and we also had a retail distribution which was focused more on specialty stores, gourmet stores, Williams-Sonoma's, Whole Foods, places like that. So we had an opportunity to provide access to the brand first and foremost. And in the market, as I said, e-commerce was just emerging. As well, the growth of premium coffee was happening. Starbucks was expanding rapidly in many cities throughout the US. And so consumers were looking for premium coffee experiences. And then several years later, within coffee, there was the growth of what we call single serve coffee, or coffee in capsules or pods, like the Keurig K-Cups and Nespresso systems. And in many cases, the proprietary system where the coffee maker and the capsules worked exclusively provided an opportunity to sell that product within e-commerce.
Oh, so you sold the whole bundle system, essentially.
Correct.
Ah, I see. Okay. So what did you have to do differently when you started thinking about going DTC?
So that's an excellent question. So the first thing we knew we had to do was hire some specialists. So we, when you think about a CPG or a food and beverage environment, back then, we didn't know direct marketing or direct response marketing. So the first thing was we hired 1 or 2 people over the years to help teach us how to do direct marketing. That was first. The second thing that we did was we tried to differentiate our product offering on our brand site. So of course we could sell all the SKUs, right? A full range. We could sell the proprietary systems. And then, another area to consider, which was something that we did, was can you offer services, like customer service, a dedicated team to explain to people how to use espresso machines, for example, and what content can you have on your site? So those were some things that supported, this move into D2C. A third aspect is really this harmonized approach to pricing and promotion, which was super important to have success, because you couldn't really think about D2C in a vacuum. You had to think about what was happening in retail, what was happening in the multi-unit cafes that we had, et cetera. And then finally, you have to invest, because it's a buy-get model. And so the marketing ratio for D2C is probably double what it might be in a traditional CPG type marketing organization.
I see. So, as you have learned over the years now, there are tons of things I'm sure you evolved over time, aside from the evolution of technology, the platforms, the systems, the tools, and everything else, merchandising, how you did it, and experimentation you did, and so forth. I'm sure there's been amazing evolution over time, right? So much has happened in those years, right? If you were to recall the top 3 to 5 things that really made a difference in giving you the growth acceleration, what would those be?
Okay. So, I've already mentioned the first point, which was the segmenting of the product portfolio. And so, on a brand site, you can have your full range, of course. And then in the marketplaces, you have to think about they have more reach, more scale, and more mass appeal. So products that have a little more, mass appeal would be perfect to be promoting on the marketplaces. Bundles, multi-packs, things of that nature, variety packs, and more entry-level price points. So there was kind of this segmentation, but then at the same time, looking at the whole thing holistically. That was a really key piece to manage both sides. The next thing that we did was we focused on a subscription model. So a recurring revenue model, which makes a lot of sense for consumables. And that was something that we did, of course, on the brand site, and then eventually with Amazon with their subscribe and save program. So we were able to capitalize on subscription on both sides. And then finally, the technology. Of course, the technology changed so much over the years. We were so scrappy in the beginning. And throughout the years, with the advancement of technology, it really helped propel the business. So for example, with the focus on subscription, it's so important to have a great user interface, right? And to allow the consumer to join your program really simply, flawlessly. So how do you sign up? from your smartphone. It has to be very easy. So this was something that we were able to do with technology. And then the other piece that is so important with subscriptions is the consumer needs to control their subscription whenever they want, however they want, how much product they want, how often it comes. They need to skip shipments. All of that needs to be managed through technology, through an app or, on your phone. So that was really critical. Technology was another key piece.
This is fascinating, right? This is so critical these days. Like if you're going to provide a high-end luxury access, how does that translate into an experience that also communicates something of that brand attribute, right? So Allan, I wanted to go to you on that particular topic here, right? It's beautiful that Beverly is able to control that on her platform because this is all part of the brand site, right? Once you go into the marketplaces, so to speak, in the wild, right? Because every marketplace is somewhat different, right? Can you achieve something similar of that kind of experience there? I have frankly not seen much of that whenever I go to Walmart on their .com site. Get the mic.
It's a great question, Seraj. Oftentimes a brand's DTC site will be the best experience they can deliver online. And the marketplaces, you'll have a struggle to bring that same level of richness to those sites. There are tools, as most people I think have probably heard. For example, Amazon has brand stores, which are pretty robust and get more robust all the time. They have A+ content. They now have video ads. Walmart is implementing a lot of those same types of capabilities over time, although they're a little behind Amazon today. But yes, I would say the DTC site tends to be the standard. And then from there, you see what you can implement in these other marketplaces that's equally good, or maybe a little more tailored to what that shopper is considering competitively and so forth.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. So Beverly, the one last question I have for you, because it's quite intriguing here, before I move on to Allan, is to have built such an impressive subscription base that you have, which is amazing, right? There's so many benefits that come with that in the way it brings stability to the business and its revenue forecasting and all of that to the supply chain and so forth. How do you start though? The question is, you're going to have to bring the consumer here somehow, right? Mm-hmm. And there is something about an acquisition engine you have to create. And how did you go about that? What was your general principle around getting the acquisition machine in place?
Yeah, so in the beginning, Seraj, it was quite challenging because Illy's a niche brand with a niche target. So it was really difficult to find people who were passionate about coffee who wanted to try Illy and sign up for a subscription. So back in the early stages of the subscription business model, we did a lot of print advertising, believe it or not.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of waste, of course. And we used the verticals that made sense in terms of our brand associations, like food and wine, travel, art and culture. So we tried to use publications that targeted those kinds of passion points and interests, as well as some geo-targeting, like in New York and LA, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And, that worked up to a point, but there was a lot of waste. And so in today's, ever-changing digital landscape, right? The advice that I have is to continue to have this mindset of curiosity and experimentation and really work toward, fine-tuning your digital media mix across all the channels to see what works and keep rebalancing and testing and optimizing.
Perfect.
Around these passion points.
I got it. You've done a lot. We could talk for hours, frankly, in terms of how you've been able to really bring the different elements there especially some of the partnerships you've actually done and so forth. So that's just monumental, right? I'm going to come back to that because some of the topics we talked to Allan about are going to lead there. So Allan, to you now. All right. So first of all, you've been around. You've been from big companies, small companies, created your own brands. What motivated you to start Bold?
Yeah, so I started, many years ago in IT. So I was an IT consultant before I moved into packaged goods, and then restarted my life at Procter & Gamble, where I spent 14 years. And my history at P&G was I moved through the brand management track and eventually switched into a retail and e-commerce track, and eventually ended up leading P&G's global direct-to-consumer e-commerce. So during a certain period, if you bought an Oral-B online or a Gillette razor or SK-II Cosmetics in the US, China, or Germany, those were the stores and the teams that I managed. And really what inspired me was just how difficult that process was. So we worked with 5 or 6, depending on the time, different suppliers to bring the strategy to life. We had web developers, we had acquisition marketers, we had conversion rate optimization specialists, and much more. And that was really, really hard for us. And it was hard to figure out who was accountable and which part of the process was working and which part wasn't. And we made it work. We got a lot of growth while I was there. I think there was limitless more potential, and there still is. But we were able to deliver about 60% growth in the period that I was there, which was just a couple of years. But I mulled on that experience for a number of years, and as I was doing other work with other brands around the country and around the world, and started to believe that there was an opportunity to really bring e-commerce together into one house, in particular for small to mid-sized companies. And that was the genesis of Bold Strategies, formerly known as Bold Retail. We've tried to really bring in the acquisition, the conversion, and the retention into one house, along with fulfillment, and make it just very, very simple for our prospects. And that's the story. So I'm very much in love with what I'm doing, in particular the opportunity to help innovators, big and small, and that's what gets me awake every morning.
It's fascinating, actually. Totally. Allan, when you speak like that, the first thing that comes to mind is you've really seen both traditional CPG marketing working through the retail channel, and you've seen its transition and a parallel track in e-commerce, right? How is this so different? Why is it that the leader brands or established brands have such a struggle really figuring out what it is like to be out there and really make the most of the opportunity that's emerging? Some of them are really caught off guard, it seems, right? Why is that a disconnect there?
It is so dramatically different. So for the past 50 years, all of these big CPGs and mid-sized CPGs, and to some extent small CPGs as well, they've learned how to do one thing really well, which is how to sell to Walmart, how to sell to Kroger, how to sell to Dollar General. And they've never had, most of them, never had to sell to individuals before. And there's a lot of complexity that comes with that. You have to understand how that impacts your accounting systems, how it impacts your tax, how it impacts your supply chain. How do you build that relationship in a meaningful way with that single consumer when there are hundreds of millions of them in the country? So they've outsourced that to the retailer, and now finally they have the opportunity for control again. And there are millions of marketers and other managers around the world who would love to have that control. They don't know they have it, and they don't know what to do with it today. So the challenge is, number one, determining that control is now available to them. They can control what their brand looks like. They can control what the pricing is. They can control what's in distribution. They can pull items, push items. They can attract people using different media channels. But that power comes with a lot of complexity as well. And figuring their way through that complexity is really the challenge facing our clients and the industry today.
Which is interesting, right? It was good that the e-commerce channel was growing slowly and gradually, but now that it has hit so hard and accelerated, it precipitates the question even more so now, right? It's how to deal with it. So I'm now going to go a little deeper with questions starting with you, and then Beverly, we expect you to jump in, you know, as you see appropriate here. So here's the first question. You look at this landscape. I just threw a brand, you know, which we have relationship with right now. This is just a Mondelez brand, right? But that's just for illustrative purposes. You have a brand that's got their captive DTC, and then they see all of these marketplaces on the right, right? If you are just looking at this landscape as it is, it would seem very, very confusing. There's just a lot going on. There are lots of places you could be doing yourself. You could be out there in other channels. Let's dissect this a little bit from your experiences, your collective experiences, right? Let's start with the product first, and then we'll go into the media options, right? How do you look at the product options, first of all, when you look at a brand creating its own experience versus the marketplaces?
It's a very, very complicated question. So as you look at your product portfolio, let's say you've got 150 items, you know, in general, your consumers are going to expect to find most, if not all of those items on your website. But then you don't want to be competing with your retail partners. So you've got to figure out which portion of that is going to go to Amazon, which portion of that is going to go to Walmart, which portion is going to go to Target, and then what are the economics of those channels that cause me to think about pricing and bundling and promotion differently. So the first question is definitely not a technical question. It is a channel strategy question, and CPGs actually are very good at this when it comes to physical retail. They've been doing it for years. Here's my club SKU and my Walgreens SKU and my Walmart SKU and my Kroger SKU. They have to do that exercise all over again, but now it's DTC versus Walmart.com versus Amazon.com versus Target.com. So different landscape, same problem, and they have to look at it again.
So let's talk about this, right, more explicitly. What are these interdependencies between the DTC and the marketplaces, right? Because classic logic says, look, if I'm a mass marketer, I want to be anywhere and everywhere where my consumer is, right? Broad distribution, we've been told in marketing texts over and over again, get as much distribution as you can get, right? What are these relationships between the two? How do you manage the two? And I know you have a perspective on it, so I'm going to pretty much plant this thing and let you talk about it.
Yeah, again, it's a multifaceted question, but overall, DTC is going to be the place where you control the experience, as we said, and you've got the ability to deliver that experience that's going to drive your brand in the best possible way. The challenge is that acquisition is oftentimes going to be expensive. So you're going to have to do all of the work to figure out the media to bring those people to the site. Whereas if you take Marketplace on the left side of the page, you know, Amazon's already done that work. And in fact, they've got 120 million people in their Prime program alone, not to mention all the other shoppers that aren't Prime today. So in the retailer marketplace, it's really about acquisition at a better cost using established systems that the retailer has already built for you, whether that's Amazon or Walmart or others as well. The way I would reframe it is, how do you use them together? So how do you look at bringing people in through your Amazon assortment and your Amazon content and your Amazon marketing, and find ways within the constraints of the agreements that you have with that retail partner to gradually get people to engage more with your brand in places you control, whether that's email, your website, or other media. So use that scale that the retailer has built for you to bring people into that new flavor, into your brand overall, and then find a way to build a deeper relationship where you have more control over time.
So essentially, Beverly, this is what you had, right? In the way you were creating it. If I were to put Illy into this framework, right? You didn't necessarily have the benefit of the marketplaces in the early years because they weren't really as well developed. They didn't have any of their own media support or anything of that sort. So that came later in the game, right? But if you were to look at it now, right, you've got significant portion of your subscription base that's happening on the DTC site, right? Which is a stable base. And so how are you managing the marketplace and the interaction between the two? You've certainly established your trust and the brand equity by being out there, and you also have physical presence. So obviously that helps you, right? From the brand perspective.
Right.
But
So
how do you see the role of the marketplace into this whole thing?
Right. So one thing to consider from a brand perspective is which marketplace makes the most sense for your brand. So Target might make more sense for a more creative millennial brand than Walmart, as an example. So this is another filter that you can use to think through which ones do you want to test and optimize based on your brand and your targeting. The other thing that's really important is to manage the whole ecosystem, with one team, because the consumer, of course, is shopping throughout multiple channels, throughout the whole customer journey. And so managing, the whole ecosystem with a few sets of eyes really makes a lot of sense, because, you have your pricing, your promotion, et cetera. And you really have to have kind of a check and balance, and you have to have a reason for being across the D2C side and on the marketplace side.
Yeah, so essentially you have to have your sort of a war room kind of flavor, right? You're sort of the master control, a dispatch, right? From where everything is being monitored from a single source. And Allan, I'm going to let you speak to that shortly, because I know you have a perspective on that. On that particular part of you guys spoke a lot about merchandising, the SKU distribution, selective, knowing platforms and their audience contribution, right? Where it is appropriate and a good fit and so forth. But media is another element that I wanted us to understand a little bit better, because there is a lot of confusion there. So if I were to go back to this slide, right? Now think of this from a media angle, right? Quite a few things have actually happened. Both of you know, right? These marketplaces have their own media platforms of their own, right? They want to be able to have brands spend the time, money over there, right? So I want your angle on that versus what you do when you're trying to build your own trust and engagement with your own brand and have the full experience so people really get to know your brand a lot, right? How do you see the media fitting into this landscape? Start with you, Allan.
Yeah, so we look at the universe as having two pillars from a media standpoint. There's the retail media, which we call on-platform, and there's the off-platform media, which is basically everything else, including the great work that Acuity does for partners. And we believe that both of them have to work hand in hand for you to be successful. And again, this is something that probably many of the people on the call know, but Amazon will reward you for bringing more people to your listing with higher organic search results. So finding ways to get those people who are not already on Amazon and bring them to your listing has a doubly impactful result, in that you get the sales from that media, and you also get the sales from the organic search.
Oh, that's very interesting, right? So it means that if we were in that path with let's say programmatic for a second, right, where Acuity is, and if the brand were to take some of those dollars and spend it back by bringing consumers to Amazon, you actually get some benefit from that, right?
You get two benefits. You get the benefit of that traffic and hopefully the conversions and sales that are delivered by that traffic, and the conversion rates on Amazon tend to be quite good. A good Amazon listing will convert 10% of people who land there on average. And then you also get the fact that Amazon's A9 algorithm is going to bump you up in the rankings, and you'll start to show up for more organic keywords as well.
That is very interesting. And I didn't know that the algorithm was doing that, but we work with clients who actually ask us to do that. So for example, we would be working with brands where we would be bringing them to the site, their own brand site, but they would also say, hey, we want you to siphon traffic away to Amazon, to Walmart, to Walgreens, and a few others, right? Which it seems like it feeds into that algorithmic process. Beverly, you have any perspective on the media side of it?
Yeah, so I would say within Amazon in particular, of course, you need to pay to play. And so you really need to, you can build a brand on Amazon with the reach and with all of the tools and technologies that they have. And so you really need to pay to play. So you have to, you know, participate in search programs, display media programs, and all of the promotional programs that they offer, certainly around Prime Day and other events that they have through the year, because you really got to stimulate not only the upper funnel, get new consumers in, but then you've got to promote the product to get the velocity of your product turning so that they give you another PO and they order more products. So,
oh, I see. That's
so
true.
you have to pull it through the promotion.
Of course. I got it.
Now, I do live in Bentonville, so I got to say a word about Walmart as well. You know, Amazon has definitely done a lot to build their ad platform. I will tell you, Walmart is catching up quickly. So for the people, you know, listening to this call, Walmart is one to watch. Their tools are becoming more sophisticated every day, and in addition to that, it's less competitive than Amazon today. So there are some good bargains to be had in the world of Walmart. And then I'm sure a lot of people have heard that Instacart is now aggressively pursuing their ad product as well. So it's another one to watch.
Exactly. I think this whole movement towards click and collect is also adding to the whole growth element in a very different way, right? And so I think that's very interesting. Beverly, do you see the frame of how you bring consumers to the brand side as sort of still predominantly sort of the search and social and some of the performance type, very targeted, precision targeted audiences which you really care about? Is that how you see how the brand begins to build its own while you are also doing all the things within the specific marketplaces, or is there something different to think about?
No, that would be typical, which would be to just optimize the mix, you know, across all the normal channels, including email, which can be a very, very productive channel, low cost. So
perfect. Okay. All right. Let's move a little bit further here, Allan. The idea that that Beverly was proposing in the way she organized her team, right, is sort of the command central, right? You want to elaborate a little bit about how you see that? That might actually, because there is a centralization theme beginning to emerge here, and why?
Yeah, and I'll speak a little bit to my big company experience. In a big company, you've got sales teams that are organized by retailer. So you've got a Walmart team, you've got an Amazon team, you've got a Kroger team, Walgreens, all the way down the list. And then for that reason, the e-commerce efforts sometimes de facto get organized in that same way. And that's not a good thing for big companies. And it's an even worse thing for small and mid-sized companies, because now you've got 3 people creating content in 3 different ways. You've got 3 people looking at the problem of retailer media in 3 different ways. And before you know it, it's a big mess. So my one piece of advice to anybody who's looking at the journey of how do I build my in-house team would be to really spend a lot of time figuring out what can and should be centralized up front. And what almost certainly can be centralized to a very large extent is your brand and creative strategy online. So, you know, if you're doing A+ content on Amazon, chances are your enhanced content on Walmart should look very similar. Your campaign strategy should probably look very similar, because those 2 platforms, for example, have an enormous number of shoppers in common. Your marketing, merchandising, and pricing strategy may be different at each, but it should be considered in context of an overall e-commerce strategy. And then there's some fulfillment decisions and other decisions that can be scaled. What's not as scalable from a DTC standpoint, and Beverly just talked about, one big piece of that, for example, is your email marketing campaigns and your CRM. That's really its own thing. You know, the extended experiences you want to build in terms of user-generated content and other really rich ways to engage with the brand, you know, applications and apps and so forth. You know, that's really specific to your DTC. And then, you know, you also have the opportunity to look at a lot more data on your DTC site. So you want to make sure that you're building that analytic capability against DTC, so you can do A/B testing, You can do pricing testing, and you can really go deep into the analytics to figure out which content is engaging best. And maybe that goes back to your retail partners as well.
So it appears like all the learning you do on the DTC, which is your own brand side, and the experimentation you do, you could bring to all of the other places where it's happening, right? If like certain things people are asking for more or are more happy with, obviously you can propagate that essentially to all other places where you have presence, right? Did I get that right?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, like, the very controversial part of my job when I worked at P&G was the P&G e-store. And, the very legitimate and overt reason that P&G said they wanted to do an e-store for all their brands was to generate learning that they could bring to retailers. And we tried to uphold that mission, and we tried to bring them data about different bundles that might work at retail and other things. So the learning you can get on your DTC platform, where you control everything, every word, every image, every pixel, is very, very valuable if you use that with your retail partners as well.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. Okay, guys, I don't want to hog the entire time. So what I'm going to do is, with your permission, I'm going to summarize this conversation, even though there's a lot we talked about. So I want to do that in a very shortest possible time I can, and then open it up for Q&A, because I know the audience has some pretty exciting questions for you as well, right? So let's go here with a quick summary of what we talked about today, the things that people have to worry about, right? Some amazing lessons that you've summarized in a very short period of time. So that was great. One is, you start with the market, right? The way, Beverly, you started. You have to know what's the competition out there, what brand assets you have. Are you a leader? Are you a challenger? That will determine exactly how you play the market. Are you upscale or middle scale, right? All of that determines how you play into this market, because it may not be as ubiquitous as one might imagine if you are a mass market. There's the other issue that pops up. Allan, you and I have talked about this thing. This is the gray market, right? You pick any brand out there, which we were researching recently, and you got 93 resellers out there.
Yes.
It's like these guys are doing whatever they want, right? And it's crazy. It could marginalize the brand, and they could do pricing whichever way they like, and now you've lost control, right? And so you obviously have to really think about that. So that's one part of it. You guys spend a lot of time on merchandising, the presence, how you bundle, and all of those things, and the pricing element. We're going to get to that a little bit further in terms of like, okay, what's the pricing on the DTC and your own brand side versus what the pricing that you actually do on marketplaces. Is there a lifetime value consideration that one needs to think about? There may be in the way you make marketing investments to happen. All of that matters. Media. Beverly, you mentioned that. Just because everything in e-commerce and online is measurable doesn't necessarily mean that's the only thing we do. We could be very performance oriented and measure every acquisition by its cost per acquisition economics, right? But you all know the brand equity matters.
Yeah.
People need to know you for who you are before they really want to do business with you, right? And so there's a balance between how much branding and awareness building, and then how much of that really brings it back into, because it may be you get a very good transaction or a quick transaction with the lowest and most highly, promoted price. But if you don't get a subscription and a long-term loyalty from that, you haven't really achieved much, right? Which is a problem, because then that's the ROI issue that you will live with. And you mentioned it, Beverly, it's about a journey, right? Consumers go through a journey, they'll think through it, they'll discover, they'll engage with it, and so forth. Ultimately, one way or the other, somewhere they'll buy, right? And that's all good. The final thing is really the culture. Both of you pointed to that. In this channel, speed matters, but more importantly, it's the improvement, the whole idea of continuous improvement. I mean, we launched the LL Bean site in 1995. It took us 12 new generations of relaunch with e-commerce that took the brand from $0 in commerce to $3 billion annually. 85% of their sales went from the call channel to the e-commerce channel in a period of about 13 years, right? It's all about improving. And, you know, it just never ends. There is just no end to it, right? That's the principle I'm hearing from you. Did I catch that sort of a top line? Is there anything I'm really missing fundamentally?
Oh, great recap.
All right, Joanna, back to you. Let's get some questions.
Thanks so much, guys. Really fantastic. And we've got some really exciting questions. We only have 10 minutes left, so just hoping to be mindful of that. We'll kick it off. This is an open question. Is channel conflict with Walmart or others still an issue for your clients? And what are some ways to get around it? I imagine perhaps to Allan.
It is absolutely something that brands need to think about, but it's changed a lot in the past 5 years. It's changed even more in the past 90 to 120 days. I think most people on this call probably saw that Pepsi recently launched a major DTC snacks initiative. That, in addition to all the pure plays who have now become retail darlings, has really changed the landscape a little bit. So if I were a company today thinking about DTC and the risks to my retail business, I would be a little bit more aggressive about it than I was in the past. And I would also think about the differentiation story. So what am I going to uniquely do on DTC that's going to give me a reason to tell my retailer when I look at them in the eye that this is something truly different and special. It's serving my loyal shoppers. It's serving the learning objective. And it's important to both of us as a learning tool. So
great. Thank you.
If I was, to say it another way, if I was 9 out of 10 scared 5 years ago about it, I'm probably 3 out of 10 scared about it today.
Yeah, that makes
Great.
sense. Yeah.
This is a cool question. I think that might be interesting as well for Beverly. Are you seeing a sea of change in the CPG space in terms of e-commerce? Those brands who were traditionally data poor from a digital sales perspective. So does this sprint to e-commerce by CPGs help shift the balance and rapidly increase their own learnings using new data to inform future strategies?
Yeah, so we all know how much data there is now, right? And I think that's one of the key challenges that many brands have, is how to make sense of the technology, the so-called marketing tech stack, right? As well as getting your hands around the data. And so for sure, having your own site is a great way to test and learn and optimize, and to really get some experience that you could also then apply on the the e-tailer side or the marketplace side as well. Yeah.
The interesting part I like about the way you guys have talked about it is being able to bring that data to the merchant,
right,
at Walmart or Walgreens or Dollar General, right? And be able to say, look, this is what we know about our consumer. This is what they like. This is the way they like to shop. And therefore, I'm proposing these types of programs for you in your channel, right? I mean, you are really able to be far more proactive in your channel relationships. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you take the risk off of them and you put it on yourself, right? You launch a program or a product for 3 months, you get the learning, and they don't have to see it suffer on the shelf if it doesn't work.
Yep.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, I thought this was also a really great one. What are the 3 most important things that need to be in place before launching your business in the marketplace?
Wow.
We could choose another one if we don't.
Well, I'll give you one. Certainly a good and thoughtful strategy about the role it's going to play in your business. So don't be in too much of a hurry to get all 382 of your items online day one. Let's start building content and push it all out. Take a pause and really spend 2, 4, 6, 12 weeks, however much it takes your organization to think about strategy. Get it down on paper and then move. Don't just start moving for the purpose of trying to catch the gold rush, like Seraj said. So
Yeah,
Beverly, that leaves you 2.
Yeah, get your reasons, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you have a clear reason for why you want to be there, right? Because it's going to somehow complement your existing sales and marketing strategy, then I think it just makes it that much easier to then defend it, because really for one very important reason, let me tell you, Allan, Beverly, I don't know what your experiences have been. The biggest issue I have had in the past is managing the client's expectations, which is when they go online, they hear all this big growth story, right? The way I started here. And they say, oh my God, so I can just jump right in and boom, we're going to start seeing sales coming and register ringing. The fact of the matter is it takes time. And so if your reasoning and your strategy is clear up front, it gives you the runway to be patient and be able to achieve what you can ultimately really achieve, right? And I think that I see that as the clear advantage to having done some thinking up front. You agree?
I think the Ely work is a great example. I mean, that's an asset, right? They've built something that's valuable in and of itself beyond the sales it's generated. So
yeah, exactly. It's a franchise you build. I mean, it's a fantastic. I mean, this is just amazing. It's great. Joanna, do we have time for one more, or should we like wrap this up?
Yeah, let's try to scooch in one more. And there was one actually here that we spoke about with the CMO of Satwa, so maybe you can comment to it. The question is, retailers continue to drive up costs for branded search terms based on bidding on the same branded keywords, and how are you addressing that?
Okay. So this is very interesting, and I can even elaborate on what the real issue is here.
Yeah.
So in the past 10 years, just the mattress brand alone has gone from like 10 brands to 190 brands online. What does that mean? They're all bidding for the same search terms, which means the price on search has gone up significantly, like really orders of magnitude, which means the cost per acquisitions have gone up. The economics of the search channel, social channel begin to look less and less attractive over time, right? That's essentially the question. So what is the person asking for? This is true, assuming this is the fact, right? Is the person who is asking the question saying what is the alternative to that? Okay.
Well, I would address it that way, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the question essentially. I wanted to make sure I give you the context. So it's like, what would you do? And it's like, you hunt for the new channels. That's what Beverly, you said earlier, right? It's like, you got to keep looking for incremental channels of where you can find greater levels of efficiency, where there is not that much crowding, right? That's what I would look for. Allan, how would you see it?
I would broaden, branded keywords are certainly very important, and everyone wants to show up for their own keyword. But typically, we recommend campaigns that have hundreds or thousands of different keywords and competitive brand names and long tail keywords and misspellings and everything else. So I think it's true. Those very popular keywords, what we would call battlefield keywords, including your brand name, are going to get bid up. But just make sure that your strategy is broad enough that that's not where you're putting all of your eggs. And don't let the ego drive your search strategy. You may lose your brand name once or twice, but that's probably okay if you're winning other things.
Beverly, how would you look at it?
I agree. You have to have a balance between branded and not branded, unbranded words. And, there's a little bit of art and a little bit of science in all of this, right?
I got it. I will tell you, the 11 years that I spent driving credit card acquisitions for American Express, the hunt for new channels was absolutely persistent. You constantly had to go after new channels to look for greater acquisition efficiency, right? And so, yes, you will saturate. You'll saturate search, you'll saturate social. You got to go to programmatic. Maybe even programmatic ultimately will saturate, right? Which means the emergence of new things like streaming and, audio and podcast and a variety of other things. You have to start looking, because those are the emerging channels where there's greater consumer behavior. And think of the whole thing as a journey, right? So you're trying to balance. I love the way, Beverly, you described it. It's really a balance of mix of channels where you really need to go. It's no one thing that's going to really be the magic bullet for the brand. Okay, guys, we need to close here, right, Joanna? Okay. You've been just delightful. It was so amazing to have this conversation. I truly enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And frankly, we hope we continue to do a lot of business together at some point, right, as we go forward here. But it was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And then let me also thank Joanna, Jackson, Jason, the entire team behind the scenes, including our CSM team from Erica and others who have been so instrumental in helping prepare for this thing. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you so much. We love you all. And to the audience, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you took away 1 or 2 good ideas that you could implement. Hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.